Bitcoin is just digital capital, and people will pay you rent to borrow that as well. So if you had $1 million of Bitcoin, you could loan it out to someone and get a yield on it right now. In fact, that's what makes it desirable.
Billionaire Bitcoin investor Michael Saylor, in a recent interview, said that Bitcoin is a digital property that will revolutionize how values will be exchanged in the future, and Bitcoin will hold its value just like any other asset class. Saylor also said in a different interview that he sees Bitcoin as a crypto property, and by property, he means it's viewed as a fair, common piece of property beyond the control of a company or a group of individuals. He also said that of everything out in the crypto universe, the thing that is most likely to be deemed property in any given nation-state is Bitcoin. He reveres Bitcoin as one such digital property that is equivalent to real estate. If we look closer, actually, there are a good number of similarities between Bitcoin and real estate. Spencer Bogart, the general partner at Blockchain Capital, says Bitcoin is the most interesting property in the world. First and foremost, similarity is that Bitcoin is scarce, just like any other physical property we see today. The total number of Bitcoin is limited to only 21 million. Since the nature of Bitcoin is fungible, every piece of this property is the same as every other piece. Additionally, Bitcoin's scarcity is mathematically verifiable. In other words, Bitcoin's scarcity is absolute. It's even more absolute than physical territory that can be geologically formed over time, reclaimed or colonized in space in the future, etc. Since you can use them discreetly, nobody would know if you're carrying it, says Bogart. With a minimum investment of $100, you can even buy a hardware wallet and store unlimited value in it and still don't need to disclose it to someone.
Yeah, I think what Warren misses is that land is a form of physical capital, right? And housing is a form of physical capital. And people will pay you rent on the farmland so they can farm it, and they'll pay you rent on the housing so they can live in it. Bitcoin is just digital capital, and people will pay you rent to borrow that as well. So if you had $1 million of Bitcoin, you could loan it out to someone and get a yield on it right now. In fact, that's what makes it desirable. If I had $1 million of farmland in Argentina, I could only rent it to a farmer in Argentina.
Exactly. In real estate, we are bound with physical location and can't move the real estate property as per our convenience. Definitely not the case with Bitcoin here. Digital real estate means your property is now portable with the help of the internet and technology, while fungibility makes it a lot more liquid than traditional real estate. Bogart says it's programmable, non-discriminatory, unseizable. Its programmability empowers the owner to set who can access or use it and for how long. This brings a slew of benefits and new possibilities, including being your own bank capabilities. The digital territory is also non-discriminatory by following one simple rule: the owner of the private key controls the property. In other words, no one can take your digital plot of land from you unless you allow them to. This is nothing short of a breakthrough for objective property rights, undermining dependence on courts and governments.
If I had $1 million of apartments in Argentina, I could only rent that to people that wanted to live in Argentina. If I had $1 million of Bitcoin in Argentina, I could loan it to a capitalist in Singapore that would probably pay me 8% yield. And then if someone in London heard about it, they might pay me 9% yield. And occasionally someone might decide they want to pay me 18% yield or 4% yield. And so it's just capital. And if you understand it as tokenized capital or digital capital, then the question is, do I want to convert my $1 million of capital into pure digital energy and loan it to anybody in the world and rent it to anybody in the world on a network? Or do I want to convert it into physical energy like farmland? And then, of course, which country do I want the farmland in, right? And you can't move it, right? And do I want to turn it into an apartment? And the question is, what city do I want the apartment to be in?
In a recent speech at the Economic Club of New York, Michael Saylor compared Bitcoin to real estate in New York. Michael said, in the current economic turbulence and inflation, real estate retains the position of a stable and profitable asset. In this regard, Bitcoin can also be considered a safe haven asset that is not subject to inflation risks. Though gold can be viewed as a hedging instrument, it can't be rented like real estate, he added. Michael Saylor said, if your grandparents were smart enough to buy real estate in New York and your family still has it, then you're good to go. On the contrary, Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, has said in his annual shareholders meeting that he wouldn't buy any Bitcoin even if someone gives him all for $25.
Now, if you told me you owned all of the Bitcoin in the world and you offered it to me for $25, I wouldn't take it, because what would I do with it?
When asked about Warren's comments on Bitcoin, Saylor says Bitcoin doesn't need Buffett's support, and also quoted Microsoft as an example, that the company flourished without investors backing.
So, Warren is 92 years old. I don't think Warren has spent 100 hours thinking about Bitcoin. I don't think Charlie Munger at age 98 has spent 100 hours thinking about Bitcoin. I think that if Warren understood Bitcoin is digital property, which is a form of digital capital, if he understood that, he would go, oh yeah, it's just a dematerialized apartment. My choice is I buy a rental apartment, or I buy 100 acres in Kansas, or I buy a Bitcoin. That's my choice. And can you get, by the way, it's kind of silly to buy all the Bitcoin. The whole point is to buy a small part of the Bitcoin, but it's just as silly as saying, what if I could just own all the land in the world? Well, you don't really want to own all the land in the world, because you want other people in the world in the network that are motivated by ownership to trade with you. So I really think that's like the wrong way to think of it. The right way to think of it is, would I rather own $1 million of apartments in New York City, or $1 million of land in Kansas, or $1 million of land in Nigeria, or $1 million of Bitcoin anywhere? And what can you do with property? You can rent it, you can develop it, or you can mortgage it. Can you do that with land? Yes. Can you do that with a building? Probably. Can you do that with Bitcoin? Certainly. You can do it with all three of those. The difference is, you can mortgage Bitcoin, you can borrow against Bitcoin from any bank in the world, whereas it's probably hard for you to borrow against land in Central Africa from a bank in New York. They probably won't give you the mortgage. So it's hard to mortgage things that have physical nexus. Try to get a mortgage on your house in Ukraine or in Moscow right now, if you live in San Francisco, right? They'll laugh at you. So you can't mortgage physical properties so easily. Can you develop them? Right? Sometimes not, right? Try to develop your land in New York City if a politician decides that they don't want that to be developed, right? So you have political constraints on what you can develop. You have physical constraints on what you can mortgage. Can you rent it? Same issue, right? Which is, you can't rent an apartment in New York City to someone in San Francisco. You can't rent something in Central Africa to a person living in Argentina. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, you could rent your Bitcoin on Saturday morning from Singapore to someone in Monaco. And on Sunday, you could rent it to someone in London. And on Monday, you could move it over and rent it to someone in San Francisco. You could write a computer program to rent the Bitcoin, and it could be rented differently while you sleep. So you see, Bitcoin is actually better property. It's a better gold than gold. It's a better property than property. It's a better money than most currencies.
Saylor's faith in Bitcoin seems to increase as the days pass. His company, MicroStrategy, and its subsidiaries have spent nearly $4 billion on Bitcoin purchases and owns 129,218 as of April 2021. Saylor, in a Twitter message, said MicroStrategy is working with Fidelity to give its employees access to Bitcoin as part of its 401k program. As we come to the end of the video, do you think Bitcoin is a good option for investing, like real estate? Comment your thoughts below. Be sure to subscribe and like the video if you feel it helps you. Until next time.